thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. So how many of y'all here are math teachers? Show of hands. Awesome. Air high five. How many of y'all teach science? Sweet. All right. So I'm going to try to help show how you can empower your students to communicate their thought process. Really, that's my goal. My name is John McGowan. I work for TextHelp. We make EquatIO, we make Read and Write, a bunch of other awesome Chrome extensions. The root of TextHelp's mission is to create accessible technology. So there are so many students with identified disabilities that have requirements to help them be successful in class. I always say that all of our accessible technology is required for some, but awesome for all. So literally, I talk to my phone all the time to dictate emails. That's accessible technology that I use to make my life be more powerful. So the same thing with our students. The difficulty with math and science is we have a lot of cumbersome notational components. It's difficult to type. There's no keyboard keys for my students to use. If I want them to work digitally, they have to have some knowledge that are prerequisites for them to communicate their thought process online. So especially my struggling students, that's like an extra barrier for them to communicate when generally they're the ones who need it the most. So everything that we make in EquatIO is for empowering students to communicate. So one of the things that we think about with math, it's cumbersome to type, it's super important. I think obviously is the most important thing ever. You can choose to disagree, but I have the microphone, so I'm right for now. And honestly, like, math has not changed much. And honestly, this could be, if you just take this and put a device in front of them, that'd be similar, but most of the time it could just add some color, and that's what a typical classroom looks like. And so I think that's the big thing that I want to do is help shift math instruction to utilize these amazing devices. My students walk into class with a Chromebook or a computer, and they think their math experience is going to be different. And a lot of times I would disappoint them and say, well, maybe today we just paper and pencil. And that is a disservice to those students who need that accessibility and need alternative ways. But honestly, one of my favorite quotes is, as much as I love math, I don't teach math, I teach kids. And the only way that I can teach kids is to be able to create an engagement between them, develop a relationship, and technology empowers us to do that. So that's what I want to do there. For my goal is to empower the students to communicate. I have my slide deck here. I think we can share it digitally. Is it on the website maybe? You'll get my slide deck, but I'm going to go off the slide deck and just demo for you. And so really one of the big things that I want to show is the way that I can work in a Google Doc. So the G Suite is amazing for all those collaborative pieces. The digital aspect, it's great for students who seem to lose papers all the time. It's not really great for them to have to collect and bring things. But honestly, for me as a teacher, I want to have that digital workflow. If I can clone myself and talk to all my students much faster than I can face-to-face, I want to do that. I want to leverage technology. So I want to work in the G Suite because then I can be a more effective teacher. And honestly, I can do that in less time. So not only save time, but what I actually do with my work, I'm a better teacher. And so I need to get them in this digital realm, and in order to do that, I need to get them to respond digitally, which is their hurdle for that. So EquatIO is what we're building to kind of overcome that. So it's a Chrome extension. We used to have an add-on, but add-ons are limited. For instance, in a form response, there's no add-ons to allow students to respond to a Google form. With Chrome extensions, we can do that. So that's kind of why we do a Chrome extension. You just click on the Chrome extension, it pops up our toolbar, which gives us a lot of ways to have input methods. So as a philosophy, there's this thing called the Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. And essentially what it says is, I think, you should give students a choice in how they want to respond, how they want to create and consume their math. And when I say math, I mean math or science. They have the same pain points, cumbersome notational components, and then an underlying pedagogical stance where they have to connect notation with terminology. So we have to solve the same problem. I just say math because it comes out of my word naturally. So here, one of the things that we build in is prediction. So one of the things for me as a teacher is my workflow. Like, it's hard for me to make a plus sign because I have to reach with my left pinky, hit shift, reach with my right pinky, and hit the plus key. That's hard for me to do with my dexterity. So I'd be much faster if I could hit PL and hit enter. So like that just does a prediction component. So for me as a teacher, that makes me faster. I love being faster because I spend less time doing things. However, for my students, the way that we're used to doing the traditional palette-based, you go find the insert, the equation, find the picture of the math I want to make. So if I want to make a square root, oh, there it is. I know what's in there. How do I know that? I'm a math teacher. I know what a square root symbol looks like. I can click on that button, click on that, and insert square root of x. So I can do that because I love math and I know that I've been programmed how that should work. My struggling students, they don't know what the square root symbol looks like. Or if they're just learning that, they don't know what the symbol note looks like. So there's a barrier. They need to have know what the notation looks like as a prerequisite for them to be able to make their thoughts online. So as here, one of the things that they can do is just start typing SQ, and it comes up with all the math or science things as they want. So square root, I know what that phrase looks like. I can just see that. And then I think as a teacher, from a pedagogical standpoint, I have the terminology and the notation side by side to help cement those together for them. And they can hit enter, and it makes that square root symbol, square root of 4. And now I can just insert that into my document. So I can start to communicate from that thought process. So the other cool part about Text Help is we have another Chrome extension that's way more popular than EquatIO called Read and Write. And so Read and Write does a bunch of amazing things, but one of the things it can do is read aloud for students. So I can just hit play on there. I don't know if you can hear that as well, but it reads it out and says square root of 4. So not only do we make things easy to make them digital, we also make them accessible. So we tick that box for those students who are required to have that accessibility. Let's say that they're blind or low vision or some other things. Maybe they have some auditory processing issues. However it is, I think it's great for all people because it helps cement that learning process. I can see that, see the square root 4 of notation, and hear the terminology there. So that helps me acquire that combination even faster. So I think from a pedagogical stance, that's great. Also, like I said, I love to make that faster. But on top of that, we can do a ton of other notational components. So for instance, like QU, and brings up the quadratic formula. So all these formula-based things, if it's a cumbersome notational thing, I'm not testing my students on whether they can build that digitally because it's really difficult to do. I just want to know, can you reference and utilize that in the appropriate context? Awesome. Reference these. We can also toggle that off in one of our options if you want. But on top of that, we have tons of other levels that you can do. If I am teaching calculus and I want to do the quotient rule, my students are never going to write that component in there, but I can insert that in there and let them easily have that process. And on top of that, I think the good part is one of the things that I want them to learn about when they're replacing. So if they're going to substitute a value, the underlying math thing that I always say is, if I have equality, that means two things are interchangeable. So their process is write a line of work, transcribe that down, and change a few things. So they don't really enforce what that equality means because they're transcribing and then replacing. Here I can say, well, if U is 2x, then I can just say wherever I see a U, leverage, copy, and paste with the power of technology. There's a U. I'm physically replacing that with the 2x. And then some other things, like I want to put a parentheses around that, so I can just shift, highlight that, and put a parentheses around it. So I can do all these things that I want to, and it should naturally be intuitive. And then I can actually drop that in, and I can give more steps of work as I'm going along that process. So as a teacher, I get more of that student response because it's easy for them to replace that. Like with a quadratic formula, if they're solving a quadratic, maybe the first week they'll write down that first step of the quadratic formula, and after that they'll just substitute values of A, B, and C and say, oh, well, you knew what I meant. But that gives me an extra step to help diagnose where they make errors if they do. And so that helps me out as a teacher to give them feedback as to where they need to make the corrections. So one of the other parts is we have I think over 1,200 chemical compounds and formulas. Like if I want to do aluminum diacetate, I type in AL, and it pops in, gives me all those subscripts, superscripts, all of that cumbersome notational components, and we can use prediction to do that. And again, I have some people come to the booth and they're like, well, that's kind of cheating. Well, yes, maybe at one point in the instruction that's cheating when you're having to memorize what that is, but 98% of the time it's a reference thing, and you want them to insert that from a reference standpoint. So I think that's a great way, using that prediction, to just get that component to be digital. On top of that, we have a variety of other input tools like speech input. So I can say x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 0. It was pretty good, but I forgot that I should be talking into my computer and not the microphone. But I can start with one thing in here, and I can change. So I went from speech, and then I can use my prediction in there, and so I can do a multimodal response. And then I can insert that. The other part is I can do that anywhere in the G Suite. I can do that in the docs, forms, slides, sheets, drawings. Form responses is pretty awesome. So I go to a Google form, I want to put math in there. I want to use it for formative instruction. I use it for bell ringers. So I can easily just pop this open, hit the blue EquatIO button, the same thing comes up. I have a touchscreen Chromebook, so we can use handwriting recognition. So I can just put x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 0. My equals with a minus sign. So it just automatically updates. I insert that and it puts it directly into my Google form question. And so that makes it just really easy for me to get content in there. And notice here that I might say that for here my students to solve for x. And then I don't want to be multiple choice. Google Smart changes that to a short answer. So now my students, if they have that, that's the goal. I don't want them to do multiple choice. I want to see what their thought process is. So here they can just use EquatIO in that same context. The same component, I can use speech input if I want. I can do that handwriting recognition again. Maybe I know that that's going to be like x plus 2, the quantity squared equals 0, x equals negative 2. And then I can insert that just as they would from a piece of paper if I was going to collect it. But I get the beauty of I can leverage Google Forms. When they submit that on my summary of responses, I'm going to just keep getting all of those popped in. And if I do that for my bell ringer, I can walk around and touch base with my students during that first 5 minutes, come back up and look, as a whole, does my class understand that? If so, great, I can continue on with my planned instruction. If not, that's awesome. I can like pivot from there and say, oh, it seems like we're missing that one concept, and I can revisit instantly when it's not too late. So it's not well beyond what I should have. So it's that just-in-time 4-minute response. So I can leverage that from the Google standpoint. So that's one of the really great ways that I can integrate that. Some of the other parts that we have that we launched about a month ago is, again, I want to say anywhere, if you have some Google, if you have some math, I want to make it into the Google ecosystem and make it a digital response. So how many of y'all like to flip your classroom or send out YouTube videos for your students to watch? So it's a great way for them to acquire knowledge and you to like use digital leverage to amplify yourself and replicate yourself. So one of the things I love Khan Academy, it's a great way for my students to get that instruction from without me. One of the things now, if I can use EquatIO outside of the G Suite, it'll pop open this awesome little screenshot reader. So I pause this YouTube video. My students might not understand what that is. They can just screenshot that and we'll automatically figure out what that is. We'll read that aloud to them. You can't hear it, but that's okay. And then on top of that, they can play it again, or they can just copy that, and they can go to maybe this Google form, and they wanted to use that as a response for that Google form. So I can literally just pop that up in there, and I can paste that in there. So I can take something from a digital standpoint and bring it out of like something that was in a YouTube video or not editable, not accessible, and bring it into another realm. So I can easily take that and bring it in somewhere else. So on top of that, I can do lots of other ideas if I'm working with that. If I had a Microsoft Word document where I use their equation editor or math type, and I upload that to Google Drive, Google doesn't play very well with that. They make them all pictures and images. I can do that same thing here with the screenshot reader. And I just take a screenshot of any math that I have, and it'll figure out what it is, read it aloud. But one of the benefits, when you're in the G Suite, there's an automatic edit with EquatIO, so it automatically pops it up. So you could have used EquatIO Mobile, which is another way we have. So here I wrote down on a piece of paper some math that I had. I have students who they have great handwriting, they love this digital notebook component. So anywhere on Google Chrome, you can go to EquatIO Mobile, which is m.equat.io, and it brings up, because I have a touchscreen Chromebook, they're not that ubiquitous yet, so most people don't have a touch device, but they might have a touchscreen on their Android phone or their iOS device. So on Android, just go to m.equat.io on Chrome. If you have an iPhone or an iPad, use Safari, go to m.equat.io. And what it's going to do is it's going to find out where you are and know where you have EquatIO open in other devices. So now you can use this to take a picture from something math, put it in there, put it as a form response, put it in a Google Doc, and then also do that handwriting recognition piece as well. My Wi-Fi didn't like the fact that it needs to be on the same network, so if I reopen this, maybe the Wi-Fi will cooperate, and this should pop open. If you're on a more dedicated Wi-Fi, not surrounded by a bunch of techies, then it'll automatically pop open where I have EquatIO, and then you can use that, your device capabilities to take a picture, to dictate, or use that as a touchscreen. So I pre-baked my example right here. So I took this picture earlier, and it automatically just inserts that into my doc. Again, it works the same thing as like a form response. They can take a picture of what they have, make it digital. That's great for me because I want to use a digital workflow. I can use a spreadsheet to assess quickly, to copy and paste feedback, to kind of amplify myself. But that's where the screenshot reader does a great thing as well. Like I can literally just take a picture of the student's handwriting. It'll read that aloud. That could be my handwriting. I used to ride to the bus in Singapore to my teaching gig. I'd write my practice problems on the bus. So there I can just directly upload them in. It reads it aloud, and then you can also just edit if you want from there. So it takes something that wasn't accessible, wasn't editable, brings it in, and now it is accessible for those students that need it, but it also can be read aloud. One of the other things that works really well with is PDFs. So maybe you have a PDF that you want your students to use. You can bring that in there and use Google Classroom, upload a PDF, have them read it right there out of that. You can have them edit from there. So all that stuff to bring science and math notation, bring it in digital, get students in lots of different ways that they can respond. and then communicate, empower them and engage them, because that's honestly what we need, is to get them engaged, and using these leveraged digital tools is going to get them to be more engaged in that math content. And honestly, sorry about you English language arts teachers, I don't want them all to be authors. I want them to be STEM scientists so they can help save the planet. And honestly, that's how math and science is going to help do that. We also do need amazing pieces of literature and great things like that, but I want to make people love math as much as I do. And so that's the way we want to do it, is use all technology to bring in anywhere that they have math or science content and allow them to easily respond in there. So that's all I have for you all so much. Thank you. You might see some floor clings around. You can stop by and see us at booth 1076. And also, EdTech team was super awesome. You can find out our tips. And thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, John. Hey, we have some really great math pro tips for all of you. Also, make sure you go check